go down on the pile. Yeah, we joke around all day long, but when night time comes, we joke around some more. Just throw your coat on the pile and get yourself out on the wall. Just throw your coat on the pile.
Did you ever think you'd see a Black Panther movie?
Actually, I did. And it's one of the reasons that, in the spirit of full disclosure, I was privileged to see the film. But I'm on a no spoiler reveal embargo. But I will, nonetheless, one of the reasons that I wrote Super Black is that I had anticipated that eventually they're going to get around to making a Black superhero film. And that the type of trends that were beginning to become apparent, eventually they were going to have to do it, given the popularity that comic book films starting to generate. And it was in that framework that I thought less so about Luke Cage and even Black Lightning. I thought the Black Panther was probably more screen ready. That a meaningful discussion of this figure was demanded, so that when that moment came, there would be a framework to complement or critique what eventually was presented as a film adaptation of the Black Panther.
And again, thinking about sort of generational moments, obviously you said, you were thinking in your well-timed with your scholarship that Black Panther would have to be that character. Again, never mind, start talking about, racial capitalism, neoliberal multiculturalism, et cetera, et cetera. Be like, okay, there's a deep body of work. He's an established character. We already obviously saw the wink to him and his inclusion in the other Marvel films. But for younger viewers, right, folks of a certain generation, how would you explain to them why this moment is so important? Because for a lot of them, they sort of grew up, at least to their eyes, a sort of multicultural moment. For folks of a different generation, right, our age and older, this really is a revelation.
For me, I think your comments about this generation living in this type of multicultural, multiracial environment is a very astute observation. And if we add to it, there is a generation of people who know or have lived and have a reference point as for a Black president of the United States of America. All right. So that in that context, Blackness is there's almost an intimate, everyday, esteemed, prestigious elevation of Blackness. And if we add to that the kind of like ubiquitous presence of hip hop, Blackness is in many ways permeates American popular culture. But, regardless of that type of recognition, I think for me, the Black Panthers, I would argue one dimension of finding why it resonates so well with this generation of folk, a younger generation of folk, let's say under 20, under 25, is that they have lived in an era where science fiction film as a genre has been a very dominant, preeminent film genre. And for all intents and purposes, I would argue the Black Panther, the film, resonates more as a science fiction film than it does seeing the Black Panther comic book crowd kind of being moved over into the film crowd. And so if we look at it, let's say from 1977 with Star Wars to the present moment, even though science fiction has been a dominant film genre and a popular genre, and more of our everyday lives seems to approach the science fiction fantasy, our reality is becoming more like those science fiction films. There's been a marginalization of Blackness, if not almost a erasure of it, except for, maybe a Will Smith or some other characters spearheading a science fiction film or being part of it. But this film is, I would argue, the definitive Black science fiction film, and the first. And in that way, there is something radical and revolutionary just in the aesthetic is expressed through the prism of science fiction film. But there's also the backdrop of the political context of a heightened tensions around race. When we talk about Black Lives Matter, we're talking about the offensive comments by President Trump regarding African nations, where we talk about the controversy around Black athletes taking agency of expression of their political standing by actually kneeling during the national anthem. All of these things, as well as what happened in Charlottesville with the kind of the retrofitting, refurbishing of Nazism, against that backdrop, a film that has as its trailer Gil Scott Heron's The Revolution Will Not Be Televised has a certain resonance and a certain compelling political and cultural statement that speaks beyond just a hot movie coming out at the right time.
But the playful question would have to be, I got to ask it, and I think it's something you can actually look at pretty easily empirically. How do you think Black Panther is going to play in red state America, and how do you think Donald Trump will respond to it? Is this a film he's going to screen at the White House?
No. No. Because for people who have a very constricted, narrow notion of what Black people are and can be, and even want to imagine themselves as being, this obliterates those type of racial restrictions. Now, what might occur is if this is seen as pure spectacle, and there are cases of this, I've heard people talk about this in America's deep racial past, where sometimes white folks would drive by Black churches when they let out to just see as they say, the show, so to speak, the spectacle of it, in terms of the colorful clothes and different styles and the way. So it can become, in that sense, fast forwarding to today, you can have racial animus, but maybe seeing this is like a form of special effects and spectacle entertainment. And what makes it all the more, say, maybe laughable, or you can take a ironic posture towards it, is that it's all Black people in a fantasy scape of a Wakandan African nation that one could argue does